Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. My name is Taylor Danko, and I'm the marketing coordinator here at HR for Health. Are you struggling with managing and tracking employee performance? It's no surprise that this can be a daunting task for many business owners. However, your staff wants to be reviewed. They want their skill set to be adjusted, and they want to see what they're being compared to each and every quarter. But don't worry, that's why we're having this webinar today, and we want to go over the importance of performance reviews, tips for conducting successful performance reviews, what questions you should be including, and how to ask these questions. And by the end of the session, we hope that you'll gain valuable insights into the performance review process. We're going to try to keep this not awkward and make sure that you feel prepared for when you're giving your employees their review each year and remain consistent with them. But first, I want to give you a little introduction to HR for Health and what we're all about. We can help you do HR like you've never done. Of course, we specialize in HR software for non-HR people, but that doesn't mean we don't also work with seasoned HR experts like Lauren to help make their process a little easier. Our mission is to be your compliance partner and ensure a safe and positive workplace for your employees. As a result, we hope you save money, save time, improve your company culture, and avoid lawsuits. So, with that being said, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Lauren and hope that you're really excited about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Taylor. So as she mentioned, today we're going to be talking about the importance of performance reviews, why you should be doing them, why your employees care about them. Next, we'll be going over tips for successful performance reviews, so what you should be asking, what you should be including. And then last, we're going to go over some everyday issues that you're probably facing or have faced in your practice, and how to specifically word those issues when you're talking to the employee about it. So let's jump in. So the first thing is, why are performance reviews important? So for the categories that I group them into are employee growth, documentation, and transparency. So employee growth is really important. A lot of people think of performance reviews as a negative thing, but you also want to make sure that you are encouraging your team members when they're doing well, setting goals for them so that they can continue to grow in their roles or maybe into new roles. So employee growth could be talking about promotions. Maybe they want to go into a new or expanded role. Talk about their goal achievements, what new goals that you can set for them, any certifications that they need. Maybe a lot of roles in the healthcare obviously need certifications, but what can they continue to do to expand their role? Employee growth is really important, especially in today's world where employment is so tough and retention is so tough. It's hard to find employees, so it's really crucial that you keep your team members. And that's why this category is so important with performance reviews, communicating those things to your team members and helping them reach those goals. The next thing is documentation. This is probably where people usually think about performance reviews, areas of improvements, performance issues. Of course, you want to make sure that you're communicating those to your employees, but also having that documentation in place. If for some reason, down the road, they're not performing well and you need to terminate them for the poor performance, then you have the documentation in place and to be able to prove why you terminated them and that it wasn't for a discriminatory reason. If you don't have that documentation in place, it can just be risky because they can say that you fired them because they're old or pregnant or just because you didn't like them. So you want to make sure that you have that documentation in place either way. And then it's also important for raise documentation. So if they have really high performance and you want to give them a raise, you have all the documentation in place on why they got the raise. Again, just if there's other people in the same positions, you have documentation on why you gave one employee a raise and one you didn't. So again, just in general, documentation is key. And then transparency with your employees. You don't want your employees to be guessing how they're doing. Am I doing okay? Am I not doing okay? You want them to know exactly what's expected of them, how they're performing. Two-way communication, so it's not just a one-way road. We'll go over the employee side of it as well. And then you want to make sure employees have access to their performance reviews. So no matter what method you do it in, you want to make sure that they always have access to review their performance review, come back and check, what are my goals, what I need to improve on. It just makes it better all around so they know exactly what's expected of them. Okay, so a couple tips. Where do I start with performance reviews? Maybe you're not doing these at all and you have no idea where to begin. So we suggest after the introductory period. So typically we see that's 90 days that they've been with the practice, and then annually after that. The introductory period is really helpful because it really sets a precedent for their employment. And then as you do it annually, it really continues throughout their employment. But this is a really good time to check in on, what are you doing well? Where can you improve? Where else do you need training? A lot of times, 90 days passes and then maybe they have something that they haven't learned or they are struggling with and you haven't had that meeting to really check in on it. So this is a good time to just check in, see how they're doing just in general. It doesn't always have to be negative. Again, if they're doing well, it's a great time to let them know that as well. And then just set goals for their first year as they're learning how the practice works and functions. And then you'll want to make sure that you have a consistent time frame for all of your employees. So maybe it's annually. Again, maybe you do the introductory period and annual. You just want to make sure that's consistent, especially if it's within the same position or department. And then again, in your performance review process, you want to clearly describe the criteria that you're using. So how are you rating the employees? Define how often reviews are done so employees know when to expect them. And then define who's conducting the reviews. So maybe you don't have an office manager and you're just running the practice yourself. So that'll be you as the doctor or employer. Maybe you're an office manager and you'll be doing it. Maybe you're a larger practice and you have team leads and they're going to be doing it. So either way, just defining who's going to be conducting these. Okay, so the next tip is the employee self-review. I know this is kind of a new concept to a lot of people, but it really gives the employee the opportunity to review their own performance and share their thoughts on how they're doing. It really gives them more ownership on their performance just in general. I know a lot of people can be hesitant to this, but it is really eye-opening, especially if maybe an employee isn't performing well, but they think that they're performing well, so they give themselves all the highest ratings, and then when you get to the meeting, it's really a good time to see where their mindset is at. But then on the flip side of it, maybe your employee is an awesome performer, but they give themselves really low ratings. So you can really see where there's a disconnect either way, just to make sure that you and your employee are on the same page. And then again, it gives them more ownership. They feel like they have a say in, what their ratings are. They can give their feedback and perspective. And then documenting throughout the year is really important. A lot of times, oh no, annual reviews are coming up and you only remember the last 2 weeks before the review. You want to make sure that you're documenting successes, areas of improvement throughout the year so that when it does come time to discuss with the employee, you have all of that easily accessible. So the process that we suggest is the employee does their self-review, the manager does their review of the employee. You meet on it, which is crucial, so you can discuss all the different factors. And then lastly is having the employee sign off on it. And we'll go into that a little bit further as well, but it goes into transparency. The employee always has access to it. Okay, so questions, what should you include? So there's really 3 areas that you should focus on. Again, areas of excellence. So if the employee, what are they doing well on? What areas has the employee excelled since the last evaluation? You can go over all of those positive things. What areas does the employee need to improve on? So areas of improvement. Again, you want to make sure that you're clearly defining their job description, what's expected of them. You have the handbook policies in place. You can add questions for that. And then setting future goals. So you want to make sure that, again, you want to retain your employees. They want something that they need to work towards. So we always recommend having at least 2 goals setting in the performance review so that they can meet those 2 things by the time the next review comes around. Of course, there's no legal requirements here. It's just helping to keep your employees happy and moving forward. And then in our software, we do have templates. So if you don't know where to start, what questions to ask, how to rate them, we do have templates for an annual review, introductory period, as well as an interim review. Maybe you want to do one in 6 months instead of annually, you can do that. But we have all those questions outlined for you, and then you can just customize from there. Because I know it can be overwhelming. What do I ask in my review? So we do have that available as well. So when you are actually reviewing the employee, you want to make sure that you're keeping everything objective, consistent, and data-driven. So objective is really going to be the most crucial one. You want to keep emotions out of it, feelings out of it. You want it to be very objective and factual, so that if anything ever comes back, it's objective and related to the job. Consistent. So again, anything with HR, you have to be consistent among all your employees. So especially if they're in the same position, you want to make sure that you're asking the same questions. And if they're performing the same, giving the same feedback. Again, you just want to avoid any type of discrimination claims that might come up, which we'll go over in the next slide. And then data-driven is really going to be helpful when trying to make everything objective. So using stats, data, numbers, any way that you can when you're giving this feedback in the performance review is really crucial in keeping everything objective. Again, factual, you can't argue with it when it's just the data and the numbers. Okay, so how can you avoid discrimination? So these are the things that you want to keep in mind, and you may think, oh, I would never discriminate, which obviously no one's intention is. So it's just good to keep in mind, making sure that you're asking yourself these things when you're doing a review. So protected classes is age. Yes, it's 40 and over, which is crazy. It's so young. Criminal record, disabled employees, domestic violence or stalking victims, ethnicity, genetic information, needing to take family leave of any type, gender, gender identity, hairstyle, marital status, military status, national origin, pregnancy, race, religion, and sexual orientation. So obviously those are a lot of things to keep track of and keep in the back of your mind. But at the end of the day, you just want to make sure that you're treating all of your employees the same, not holding some a higher standard than others, especially in the same role. So if they have the same experience in the same role, you want to make sure that you're holding them to the same standard and reviewing them in the same way. So again, that list can be very overwhelming, but at the end of the day, as long as you are treating everyone fairly and to the same standard, then you'll be good to go. Okay, so everyday issues. This is my favorite part of the presentation because it's real problems that you are facing every day. We've always had an employee that is late all the time, no matter what we do, what we try. So I know you guys have experienced this before. So instead of saying you are tardy too much, it's a very generic, it doesn't clearly state what too much is. You want to try something very specific and objective, again, using numbers whenever you can. So you were tardy 3 times in the past month and an average of 4 times per month over the past 6 months. So I like to look at the past month and the past 6 months because maybe the past month was really good for them and they improved. Maybe they knew their review was coming, or maybe it was really bad. So overall, you want to see a longer, stretch of time just to compare the two. But again, this is much more specific than saying you're tardy too much. You're specifically outlining why they're tardy too much and what that entails. Another thing here is that you could quote your employee handbook. So your attendance policy should define what excessive absenteeism is, what your tardiness policy is. So you can always quote that as well. Quoting your handbook is always going to be extremely objective because it's the same policy for everyone. They know that it's in their handbook and they've received it. So again, just being much more specific on the tardiness. Okay, so the next everyday issue is your insurance coordinator doesn't get their work done. So instead of saying you take too long to get your work done, you can try again being more objective and specific. And claims is 2 weeks. You have averaged 4. And taking it a step is what can make tasks more efficient. How can we get you the training and tools needed to be successful in your role? So instead of just saying you're doing this wrong, especially with something like this where it's hard to define, like you take too long, but really partnering with the employee and figuring out, okay, what else can we do as your employer to help support you and give you the training and tools that you need? maybe you shadow them doing the tasks and they're doing, 5 extra steps that they don't need to do. So this is just an opportunity to really look at that process and see how you can help them improve in the future. So it doesn't necessarily feel as much of an attack to the employee. You're really their partner in trying to figure out how to make this more efficient. And then in the long run, it's positive for the practice all around. Okay, and then the next issue that I'm sure everyone has dealt with is your dental assistant is working too much unapproved overtime. And we know that this can get very expensive. So this is definitely a tough subject. So instead of saying you work too much unapproved overtime, again, very general, what is too much? You want to try, you have worked 10 hours of unapproved overtime in the past month. Our policy requires that you get approval from the office manager for any overtime over 10 minutes per day. So again, very specific. You worked 10 hours in the last month. Again, you might want to look at the past 6 months just to see the general averages, and then you're quoting what your policy says. So you could quote your full policy if you wanted to, or you can mention it here where it's just saying our policy requires. You want to make sure that you're on top of this, of course, so that it's not costing the practice a bunch of money down the road, especially because a lot of times you might not notice that they're working all this overtime until it comes time to run payroll. And at that point, you're seeing 2 weeks of unapproved overtime versus, checking it day to day. So I'm gonna be giving a demo, so I'll show you another tool that we can do to help with this. But again, you see the too much unapproved overtime versus 10 hours of unapproved. Here's our policy. So just very specific, objective. You want to make sure that you're clearly defining these things. Okay, and then speaking of our software, if you're currently a client, you know that we just released our performance review templates, and then we do have performance reviews for the employee to complete the whole process as well. The templates are nice because, as I mentioned, we do have the first 3, so the annual, introductory, and interim. We do have those templates already available to you, but then you can fine tune them and customize them for yourself. You can create your own from scratch. But it's nice because you can ask specific questions. Maybe you need to ask specific questions for your opticians, but not your front desk employee. And maybe your insurance coordinator has different requirements. So you can really customize it based on the specific role, which is nice. And then the actual performance review process, which I'll show you in the software, you can assign it to your employees. They'll do a self-review. It has documentation on when the meeting happened, and then employee signs a copy of the review as well, and they always have access to it. A couple other things that you can do to document performance. As I mentioned, you don't want to just do this annually. You want to make sure you're keeping track of it somehow throughout the year. So violations would be more if the employee is doing something incorrectly. So that's more of a negative connotation. But if there's a one-off instance where maybe their tardiness is horrible and you need to address it right away versus waiting for the review, then you could do a violation. We do have this in the software. If you're not a client, of course, you can just do this with a Word document or however you want to do it. You just want to make sure that it's documented in some way. And then CE units and certifications. Again, a lot of these positions are requiring certifications, but you want to make sure that those are documented, and then any future certifications that they should be striving for are documented as well. And then the notes section is really helpful because in HR for Health, there's a notes feature where you as the employer or the office manager can add whatever notes you want to in the employee's file, and the employee can't see these things. So that'd be a good place to document throughout the year, like, oh, Lauren did really well on this. I want to make sure I remember it for her review, or she needs to improve on X, Y, and Z. You can put those notes into their account, and then when the performance review time comes, it's easy to just review all of that and be able to add it into the review itself. Okay, awesome. So let me give you a quick demo of our software. Pull it over. Okay, so first I'm going to go over the performance review templates. So you'll go into Documents and click Performance Review. This is where you'll see the existing templates that we provide. So the annual, probationary review, and interim. You can see that the annual one is ready to go. I'm still working on edits for probationary review and interim. So let's go ahead and click on the annual one. So you can see here, you can customize all of the questions that you're asking. You can customize the categories. So this one's performance, this one's communication. There's a safety compliance. Obviously, you want to make sure that your employees are meeting all of the OSHA standards that you have for your practice. So you can customize all the different categories. You can customize the questions that you're asking. So these are all different rating questions. So completes tasks on time, work quality, productivity, works independently. The employee and yourself will rate from a 1 to 4 or not applicable. You can also do a scale of 1 to 5. One's not better or worse, it's just personal preference if you want to do 1 to 5. And then you can also make it a text box. So I'll show you at the bottom of this review, these are all text box entries. So has the employee met goals set during last evaluation? The employee can write their text response as well as you. So these just leave them a little bit more open-ended, whereas the ratings keep it more specific and numerical. And then I always recommend having an other comment section. Again, just opens the floor for the employee or for yourself to give any other feedback that might not fall into any of these categories. Again, just keeping that open communication. So this you can customize however you want. You can also click preview so you can see how it's going to look for the employee when they do it themselves. So you can see this is a 1 to 5 scale. This is the 1 to 4 scale with NA. And then the employee is just going to come through and rate themselves here. So you can see exactly how it's going to look for them. I'm going to go ahead and close it. So once everything, it doesn't like that I made changes. So I'm going to continue without saving. And then if everything looks good, you're going to go ahead and click here and you can send it to your team. So let's say I'm the evaluator, maybe I'm the office manager of the practice and I'm reviewing Annie Smith. Maybe I have 3 employees, so I want to send it to all 3 of them and do it all at once, then I can do that. And then you'll go ahead and click send. That will send the review to the employee for them to complete on their end. So I'm going to go and view it from the employee side. So I'm going to go ahead and look at Bryn's account. So you can see that I sent her an annual review and it's currently in the pending employee review status. So that means that she needs to complete her review. As soon as she does, then I'll complete my review of her. We'll have a meeting, document when the meeting was, and then the employee will sign off on it. So you can see here what it's going to look like. Once it's completed, you'll be able to see the manager's review and the employee's review below. This is my daughter. She's my test account for everything. So once this is complete, you'll be able to see all those reviews side by side. And then you also have the option to view it as a PDF if for some reason you want to, print it and meet on it in person with the employee. You can do it. Again, they're going to have access to it in their HR for Health, so you don't have to print it, but you can if you'd like to. And then another quick feature I wanted to mention on, just because I know tardiness and overtime are such a big thing, and we already went over those everyday issues. Our tardiness feature allows you to set the start time for your employees and then give them a grace period. So if the employee starts at 9 a.m. and you want to mark them as tardy at 9:05 a.m. every day, you can give them a 5-minute grace period. Anytime they clock in after 9:05, it's going to mark a tardy for them. So again, this really helps with the objective, data-driven metrics, so that when you go to do the performance review and you say you're tardy too much, you have that data to fall back on. It's not just emotions or feelings. And again, it's just easy in one place for you, so you don't have to go searching for it. You can do 0 minutes. So if you wanted to consider them as tardy anytime after 9, which is completely fair, you can do that as well. Typically, we see 5 minutes in case there was traffic or whatever it might be. And then the email notification, if early, will send you an email if the employee clocks in too early for the day. The reason for this is, a lot of times unapproved or too much overtime is an issue. And we know that it's not just staying late that can be overtime, it's if they clock in too early. So we built this so that you can be notified in real time when an employee clocks in too early and it might end up in overtime, especially if you're in a state that has daily overtime. So if you put 10 minutes here and they clock in at 8:49, then you're going to get an email saying, Bryn Walchek clocked in too early. Go ahead and check in with them. And again, that saves you from a surprise when you're running payroll and see 2 weeks of unapproved overtime. This can kind of help as a buffer and adjust it in real time. So if I clicked save, everything looks good. You can see that she actually has 2 tardies right here. It'll say when they were expected in, what time that they actually clocked in. So she clocked in at 9:32, obviously 32 minutes late, so that's an issue. And then you can see the status. So if I'm coming in as the manager, I can add a note if I want to, and then I can mark it as excused or unexcused. You might excuse it if really it was a one-off case where their car broke down on the way there, and you're like, okay, I can write that note in there. But if they don't have that excuse, then you can mark it as unexcused. The employee is also going to get a banner when they clock in that says, "You're tardy today. Make sure you go add a note." So they can add a note here as well, explaining why they were late. And then that helps with, when you're a manager and you can't keep track of all the different things that are happening, you can refer back and see why the employee was late. But again, overall, this just keeps track of all the tardies, documentation, really keeping it objective versus having to go off of emotions or search for this data. Awesome. Well, those are 2 things I wanted to go over in the software for you guys. And I'll go ahead and kick it back over to you, Taylor.
And I'm back. Thank you everyone for sticking with us. And if you have any questions about what you just heard today, please email us at hello@hrforhealth.com. And while we still have this up on the screen, please pick up your phone and scan the QR code for a fully free, federally compliant employee handbook. And with that, please sign up for our email subscription, make sure that you are up to date on everything, and follow us on social media. And that's it.
Awesome. And Taylor, did we have any questions come through today?
We did. We did have questions come through. Thank you for reminding me about that. The first question is, can the employee see my answers in the performance review?
Oh, great question. Yes. So we do have the option to save as a draft. So maybe you're working on your answers in the software and you're not ready for the employee to see them yet. You can save the draft. The employee cannot see this draft that you have. As soon as you click submit, they will be able to see your answers, which again, we want them to see your answers because of transparency. They need to know how they're doing. Just make sure that you're ready to go as soon as you click submit. So just something to be mindful of.
Awesome. And another question that came in was, what if an employee refuses to sign the review?
Oh, yes. So that might happen, especially if they don't like the review that they were given. Maybe they think that they're an angel and aren't doing anything incorrectly, and you had some areas of improvement for them. You can, well, the first step is to let them know that just because they're signing it doesn't mean that they necessarily agree with it. It's just acknowledging that they received the review. So they're not signing saying, I agree with everything in this review. They're just signing saying that they received it, which technically they did if you're doing it in the HR for Health software. If that still doesn't work, you could, which obviously isn't ideal, but this happens with employees. You could print it and put at the bottom of the document, employee refused to sign, and see if they'll initial it. You really just want to document that the employee received it. The good news is in HR for Health, it's going to show with a timestamp when it was sent to them and that they have access to it. So you're really protected either way. It's just a matter of educating the employee on, this doesn't mean you necessarily agree with it. It's just that you received it. So definitely a tricky one, but hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Lauren. And it looks like those are the questions from today. And with that,
Cool.
I'll wrap it up and we're good.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.